Welcome to today's Explainer. We are witnessing something absolutely monumental right now. Across Asia, we're seeing the construction of a massive, unprecedented new infrastructure. But it's not the kind you can easily spot from a highway. Instead of concrete and suspension cables, this new foundation is entirely digital, and it's dramatically reshaping global economies right in front of our eyes.
Think about it like this. For over a century, the foundation of our global economy was built on physical stuff, right? Concrete, steel, rail lines, deep water ports. But that foundation is literally shifting beneath our feet. Today, microchips are the new steel. Colossal data centers are the new ports of global trade, processing information instead of actual cargo. And as you'll see today, artificial intelligence is even stepping in as the new rural health clinic. This is exactly how modern infrastructure is being built.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for the Explainer today. 1. Building modern digital infrastructure. 2. Southeast Asia's GDP surge. 3. India's rural AI clinics. 4. The traditional labor contrast. And 5. Long-term economic sustainability. Starting off with Section 1, Building Modern Digital Infrastructure.
So the global economic engine is undergoing a massive transition. Let's be real, the industrial era relied super heavily on physical infrastructure to drive growth. We're talking building brick-and-mortar hospitals to expand healthcare or pouring tons of steel to boost exports. But today, it's all about AI-driven digital infrastructure. Data centers, advanced microchips, AI diagnostics, these are taking over. Building these digital nodes is what's currently driving massive economic expansion.
Moving right along to Section 2, Southeast Asia's GDP surge. Just look at these numbers from the fourth quarter of last year. Many major economies in Southeast Asia actually surged more than 5%. Vietnam's economy climbed an incredible 8.4%. Singapore hit 6.9%, and Malaysia reached 6.3%. Even Indonesia, though not on this chart, saw a 5.3% growth. And here's the kicker. This entire robust GDP surge was driven almost entirely by one thing: the completely insatiable global demand for artificial intelligence.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how that global AI demand translates into massive local economic booms. This highlights that Singapore's massive leap was thanks specifically to strong chip exports. Meanwhile, in Malaysia, it wasn't just chip shipments. It was a massive wave of physical data center projects actually being built. They are literally constructing the hardware and the physical facilities that the global AI industry absolutely requires to function.
But, not everyone is riding the same wave. When we compare these high-tech boom nations with a more traditional economy, like Thailand, the vulnerability of the old model becomes super obvious. Thailand's growth was a comparatively modest 2.5%. Why? Because their key industry is still heavily reliant on tourism, which took a pretty noticeable hit due to a weaker dollar against the Thai baht following U.S. interest rate cuts. It's a perfect example of what happens when an economy relies on traditional sectors while neighboring countries are busy building the new digital infrastructure.
Let's look at Section 3, India's rural AI clinics.
To see what this looks like on the ground, let's zoom in to the northern state of Uttar Pradesh. A newly launched government clinic there is using AI to completely reshape frontline healthcare. See, India faces a really severe shortage of medical facilities and specialists, especially out in the countryside. That makes it incredibly hard to diagnose serious conditions like cancer or heart disease. So here is how they're bridging that gap. Local doctors submit patient x-rays, blood test results, and genetic data. Then an Indian-developed AI diagnostic system analyzes all of it. Finally, physicians use the AI's findings to detect serious conditions early on and then provide expert guidance and remote treatment plans straight to those local doctors. It's a real game changer.
And as the clinic notes, this is way more than just some flashy tech awareness campaign. The goal is, and I quote, to create access to the last village, access to the top-class clinicians. The AI is basically acting as a digital bridge. It literally takes the expertise of a top-tier medical specialist and instantly transmits it across this brand new digital infrastructure right to the most remote rural populations.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the sheer volume this technology enables. Because of this new AI capacity, this single rural clinic sees almost 2,000 patients every single day. That level of efficiency and scale, that's exactly why AI is expected to play an increasingly critical role in medical imaging and drug development all over the world.
On to Section 4, the traditional labor contrast. So, while the high-tech boom is incredible, the reality for a lot of traditional workers is incredibly stark.
For many, the search for a simple living wage is pushing them toward dangerous extremes. For instance, Russia is currently experiencing severe labor shortages, which are heightened by its ongoing invasion of Ukraine. Now, historically, Russia relied pretty heavily on laborers from Central Asian republics. However, after a deadly terrorist attack in 2024 led to the indictment of suspects from Tajikistan, public sentiment turned quite harshly against Central Asian migrants. While that huge gap in the workforce has created desperate opportunities for workers from countries like India to come in and fill those traditional labor roles, even if it means working in a conflict zone.
Just listen to this quote from an Indian sewing staff member working at a garment factory near Moscow. It perfectly explains this desperate economic calculus. 5 years ago, that specific factory had just over 20 Indian workers. Today, nearly all of its staff is from India. The monthly salary there is close to $800. For a lot of these folks, that is 5 to 6 times what they could earn back home. So, for traditional laborers left outside the tech boom, the pressure to provide for their children completely overrides the immense, literal risks of migrating to a nation currently at war.
To put that into perspective and truly understand the scale of this migration, check out this number. Russia's Interior Ministry reported that over 23,000 Indian nationals received work permits between January and June of last year alone. That's 1.8 times higher than the exact same period the year before. The traditional labor force is migrating in huge numbers, essentially just to survive. Let's move to Azov and see how this builds into a truly terrifying reality for some of these workers. Just look at the timeline of Sarbjeet Singh. In 2024, he traveled to St. Petersburg because he was promised a well-paying courier job. But upon arrival, he was detained by authorities and actually forced to sign a contract in Russian without knowing any of the details. He had unwittingly signed up for the army. Agents told him if he tried to escape, he'd be shot. After just 15 days of training, he was sent to the front line in eastern Ukraine, where he spent 8 months in combat. He was eventually shot in the leg and repatriated after the Indian government intervened, but tragically, a fellow Indian worker was killed by a drone strike right in front of him. It's a harrowing, sobering illustration of the real dangers facing workers who are just trying to escape traditional poverty.
Which brings us to our final section, long-term economic sustainability.
So the crucial point we need to understand is that this new digital infrastructure, while highly profitable right now, faces some very real vulnerabilities. Analysts are warning that the outlook for the region could be threatened by potential tariffs imposed by the Trump administration. Over in healthcare, professionals are being pretty cautious about rolling out AI too fast due to the risks of patient information leakage and privacy violations. On top of that, economies that are heavily indexing on chip and data center exports are now entirely reliant on a somewhat volatile global AI demand. And as we just saw, there are severe human-cost labor gaps forming right underneath this shiny, high-tech surface.
Which leaves us with one final major question. Can this modern digital infrastructure ultimately support the entirety of a nation's workforce? We know chips and data centers are incredibly efficient at driving GDP. We know rural AI clinics are doing amazing work expanding access to care. But will this AI boom ever create enough foundational prosperity to lift up those traditional laborers? The ones who are currently risking their lives in foreign wars just to earn a living wage? Honestly, it's the ultimate test for the new economy, and it's a reality we all need to be watching very closely. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I highly encourage you to keep exploring how this tech revolution is reshaping our world.